Welcome back. So now we're going to talk about a very special scenario. It occurs much more rarely, but as a student, you should probably learn how to solve these cases if they arise. And I'll tell you what, in my experience of solving these scenarios for people, I have probably come across this only twice in real life. But I think as a concept, you should understand, and if you see this case, you should probably know, okay, what do I do with this? Or seek help. Or watch this video again to figure out how to solve it, because this requires a bit more math than any other case that we have ever solved. So this is called problem of return, masla rad. Let's refresh the conceptual model of assigning the shares. First what we do is we look at all the relatives and we look at the fixed shares from under fixed conditions, which is Zawil Furuz, and in our case we look at table 1. We assign all shares in table 1, and then whatever is left behind we go to table 2 and look at the residuaries, the asba, and figure out who gets the rest of the property. Now, the scenario arises when there is no one in the asba list. If you look at table 2, you don't find, son, 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 and all those relatives that are in table 2. So that's when this scenario arises, because now you still have leftover property and you want to return it back to the first category, masla rad. Rad actually means in Arabic to return. So we return back to the first table or first category. And of course, if someone does not have any relatives in the first category or the second, then it goes on to Zawil Arham and then to Baitul Mal. So what's the source of this information? This comes in Surah Ahzab, verse number 6. بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم النبي أولى بالمؤمنين من أنفسهم وأزواجه أمهاتهم وأولو الأرحام بعضهم أولى ببعض في كتاب الله من المؤمنين والمهاجرين إلا أن تفعلوا إلى أوليائكم معروفا كان ذلك في الكتاب مسطورا. The Prophet is more nearer and more worthy of the believers than themselves, and his wives are the mothers of the believers. And those of the blood relationships are more entitled in the decree of Allah than other believers. So this part of the verse is what we're looking at. And you can see in most translations, they also elaborate that more entitled to inheritance in the decree of Allah. That the first right of inheritance goes to the blood relationships if there is leftover property. And the ayah continues that, and those of the blood relationships are more entitled in the decree of Allah than other believers and the immigrants, except that you may want to do some ma'roof, some kindness to your close associates. That was in the book inscribed. This is what's written in the book. When Prophet ﷺ and his companions migrated to Medina, they created the bond of brotherhood. The Ansar and Muhajirin were all living together very close to each other. They shared their properties and they also shared their inheritance in some cases. And this verse now sets the record straight that, for inheritance matters, it should go to your blood relationships and not to these Muhajirin and your brothers that are in association with the religion, not your blood brothers or blood relationships. One thing to keep in mind, that blood relationships do not include spouses, because spouses are not our blood relatives. So they are not included in this. So whenever we are dealing with masla rad, the money returns back to the relatives in the first category, except for the spouses, for the husband or the wife. So we'll talk about that as we solve some cases. So here's how you're going to solve this. You'll assign shares from table 1 as you typically do. And then when you go to table 2 with some leftover property that you want to distribute, you'll be moving from left to right, and as you scan through it, you are not finding anyone in the list. You don't see a son, 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 son. You don't have father or father's father, real brother, real sister, paternal sister, or distant male relatives. You have gone through the list and now you have reached column number 24 where it says Rad, return back of the property. So this is when we are gonna deal with this scenario. Now let's solve a case. Sarah died on April 2nd, 2020, leaving behind $100,000. At the time of her death, the relatives were mother, daughter, one son's daughter, and mother's mother. So we go to our template, we assign the share of the mother, which is 1/6, because there's a daughter present and there's a son's daughter, so children are present. Then we look at one daughter and we see that she will get 1/2 because there is no son. And then we look at son's daughter and we see that in the scenario of one daughter and no son or son's son, the son's daughter will get 1/6. And then we look at mother's mother, she won't get a share because mother is already alive. So now our common denominator becomes 6, so it's 1/6, 3/6, and 1/6. If we do the total, we are still left with one more share to give. Who gets that one share? So in this list, we don't see Sarah's spouse. We don't see husband who's still alive. So we are still left with this one share to redistribute. Now how do we give it? In this case, it's very simple. Sarah does not have a husband alive, so there is no spouse, which means that the one share can now be redistributed among all of these people based on their own proportions. So just like Masla all we need to do now is to change the denominator. So instead of 6, it will become 5, and then we can easily solve the rest of the scenario. So now we see that mother is actually getting 1/5 instead of the 1/6. So instead of the 16,666, she's getting 20,000 now. And the daughter who was supposed to get half is now getting 60%. So everyone's share has been increased by the same proportion for which they were about to get shares in the first place. So we have solved this case.